Welcome back to the Fried Egg Golf Podcast. I am your host, Andy Johnson. I'm really excited. This week, we are joined by Stewart Cink. This has been years in the making. I don't really know why I delayed so long on having Stu on. We've been talking about him coming on since the Open at the Old Course a couple of years ago, a topic we get into a little bit on this podcast. But it was really great chatting with someone who has played golf at a extraordinarily high level for a very, very long time. So we get into all sorts of topics about his career and golf as a whole. And super fun. Big thanks to Stu for giving us so much time. Before we get to Stewart, let's talk about a new sponsor, Cobalt rangefinders. Ironically, we talk about rangefinders in this episode. I just got my new Cobalt. It is awesome. I used it. I went out and played to use it before we had to start doing these reads. Using this Cobalt, I was amazed at some of the features that they've added on. In particular, they have an optical zoom, which you can get up to 12x. This is a particular pain point. If you hit a tree behind a hole, like a flag, this can ruin your round especially if you're playing for something. And it's happened to me before, and you mail it over the green. You're like, what the hell happened? The zoom is such a game changer for the rangefinder. So they go from 6x to 12x zoom, which allows you to be really precise with what you're hitting, whether it's bunker edge or whatever it is. It's designed and built for golfers who prioritize precision, consistency, and performance. And the QZ6 delivers enhanced visual clarity and confident distance measurements shot after shot. If you're interested in learning more about Cobalt rangefinders, go to cobalt-golf.com. That's cobalt-golf.com. And use the promo code FriedEggPod15, all one word, FriedEggPod15 for 15% off your order. Let's get to Stewart Cink now. All right, Stewart, this has been years in the making. Glad to have you on. I got to ask, as I was kind of just scrolling through and thinking about your career, I think one of your great accomplishments that maybe goes under the radar, you were the first pro golfer on Twitter. You were the OG. What was it like? How did you become the early adopter back in, I think it was maybe like 2009?
Oh, wait. Yeah. I don't know if I was the first one to get on there, but I was the first one to really gain a lot of followers and create these connections, like a one-on-one connection with each follower. That's the way I did it back then. And it was a new thing. And the way it got started, my kids were, if I have to do some math, my kids were like in their early teenage years, and they played ice hockey. And so you remember the show PTI, right?
Oh,
so I was watching PTI, and they were talking about an NBA player who was asking for a trade, but he didn't use the traditional route. Like, he didn't go to the front office and sort of like submit it in writing and all that. He went on social media and said, I want out. I don't remember the player. And so the conversation between Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser was not about the player in the NBA. It quickly shifted over to like, is this going to be like a new way for athletes to talk to their front offices and to their fans, and like this social media thing? Like, what is it? What's going on? And so it got me thinking, like, as a golfer, it's hard to get your personality across through the television lens and into the living room of the fans if you're not Tiger Woods or somebody that has like this unique sort of look or trait. Like Camilo was at the time was like the guy who's just, a great looking dude.
And the Spider-Man thing. Spider-Man on the green.
Come on. I mean, how's a guy like me compete against that? I mean, I can hit my 8-iron, pretty accurately, and I can shoot decent scores, but come on, Camilo. I mean, it's not giving anybody a chance. So I thought, well, maybe like it's hard for me to do that. So maybe this is a way for me to sort of like interact with some fans and get a few fans, or find out that there's some out there. And I asked my son, Connor, who was, like I said, about 13 or 14, I said, what is this? What is Twitter? What is this? And he said, it's kind of like a bare bones Facebook. And the way it works is you like put a statement out there, and then people like either like it or they don't like it, and they might follow you and become like your friend or fan. And I understood a little bit about Facebook because it was already existing. Twitter was just getting on the scene, and so I said, I don't see why I wouldn't try this. And he said, yeah, what'll probably happen is you'll probably find out like that you have like 200 or 300 people out there that like want to know what you're talking about. I'm like, 200 or 300? That sounds incredible. Like, that's awesome. So I tweeted one day, I just opened up a Twitter account and I tweeted, taking my son to hockey practice, period. That's like, okay, it's not, I demand a trade, but it's like something about me and my life. And so, uh, as I found out, there were people out there that were kind of just waiting for, sports figures or whatever to start putting messages on Twitter. And I got several hundred responses to just that one message. And every one of them followed me. And I wasn't ever a big follower back. That's probably, there was quite a huge imbalance in that. And my
That's an
followers probably,
important part of Twitter is cultivating your feed. You gotta be Spartan with who gets into that feed.
yeah. So, and I used it like a one-on-one connection with every follower. Like I would answer their questions and talk to them about their day and tell them about my day. I would I would tell everybody at once, but I would interact with them one-on-one, and it was time consuming a little bit. And of course, as it grew, as the followership grew, I learned a little bit about what they wanted to hear and about what I had fun talking about. Not that much golf, by the way. And the one-on-one thing just started to lessen just by the sheer number of people, but it grew and grew, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And it lasted until probably it lasted about 8 years, where they continued to grow, and that culture, the culture out there kind of changed too a little bit, and then
Oh yeah.
it
I miss when you're describing the idea of tweeting, I'm taking my kid to hockey practice. I miss that Twitter. I miss the
yeah,
version of like, you know what? I liked the world where it's like I'm eating a croissant. That's my Twitter
exactly.
that
It was
I
a simple world, and then nowadays I feel like if you whatever they call it anymore, I mean, I know it's called X, but it's still called tweeting. If you post on X now, I'm taking my kid to hockey practice, there'll be 50 people in my inbox that say like, why don't you go F yourself?
yeah. Yeah. There's a different energy out there
Yeah, there
in the
is.
world.
And
It's
that energy on Twitter, now X, is what kind of drove me to sort of be like, all right, I think I'm going to join the ranks and first use it as a megaphone, which I didn't really want to do at first, and then eventually just kind of just got out of it. And I'm still on there. I don't really do much posting that much, really, but anyway, that's sort of the backstory.
you hit on something. The difficulty as a pro golfer to get your personality across. You hit shots, you're inside the ropes, you're far away. The only times you get interviewed are if you're near the lead, which, there's 140 people trying to be near the lead. In your opinion, what are some ways, and this is obviously, a prescient topic in golf, that golf can do a better job of highlighting personalities and stories about players?
Well, I think it's a two-way thing. First of all, I think golf, especially the golf media, can do a little bit better job. It's perfect timing right now. We got the Olympics going, and I've always thought that. Well, I think in my lifetime, NBC has been the majority. They're the carrier for the Olympics, and they do a good job packaging those little like 3 or 4 minute promos for a sport and an athlete that you would probably never watch other than the Olympics. Some obscure athlete
Absolutely.
from another country and telling the backstory. And when that sport comes on, now you're like, that is my athlete. I want that guy or that gal to win. And you know a little bit about them. They create a connection. And I think we can do a little bit better job of that in golf. Let's have some of these little, I don't even know what you call them. You guys probably know, but a little 2 or 3 minutes, just a
We'll
little
call it
segment
vignette.
about a player in the can, waiting for that player to be in contention for the weekend. And let's run that. Let's get that player out there. And that's one thing I think. But the other thing is the player. I mean, we can benefit by just showing a little bit more emotion. The problem with that is that Tiger there's a select few people that thrive on it, but most of us have figured out that we play better golf and we're more consistent when we kind of keep the heart rate down and try to like suppress the adrenaline a little bit. And that comes off as being boring and robotic and emotionless and unengageable. That's a problem. It's a conflict. So personally, I like to try to just smile and remember like my gratitude. For me, being grateful out there is a great way for the personality just to come oozing out. And it doesn't mean I fist pump. It doesn't mean I'm like, jumping up and down and like getting excited, but it makes you knowable when you smile and when you look excited and happy about something, and when you look upset and disappointed about something, people can see it on your face. It matters, and so I think that's one thing that we all need to do too, just to let that let the personality come through a little bit in maybe some creative ways. And our partners out there in the media, I think, could do a little bit better job promoting us too.
I think, yeah, it's definitely a two-way street. Something like it's really clear, especially in I would say the last 25, 30 years, like the sports psychology, it's like stay in the present, keep your emotions at a certain level that equal where you're most comfortable. And you see outside of like team competitions, I think you don't see those huge reactions very often. And I think like it's just kind of like the push and pull of how the sport plays out. It's not like a mass adrenaline sport like basketball or, any real, football where, you make a play, you've got this time, you're operating on adrenaline and these other sports. And in golf, it's kind of like adrenaline can be a bad thing. It can lead to you not
Yeah.
hitting your numbers and all these things. I completely agree with the vignette thing. I think like as a whole golf, and this is like totally, it kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier with Twitter. It's like, there's this, rash of people that show more shots, show more shots, show more shots. And that's all the networks here now is show more shots. And what's gotten cut at the expense of that is any sort of storytelling
Mhm.
where, they feel they're like afraid to take the camera off, the players and the shots and show these vignettes. But I think they're missing the point. Like, I was on Golf Week yesterday, and they aggregate stories from all over the country, on their website with I think it's like the USA Today or whatever network of newspapers. And there was an article written by the Petoskey, Petoskey Free Press or whatever it's called. And it was about Joey Garber. And I didn't realize Joey Garber grew up in Petoskey, Michigan, which is like way at the very top of Michigan. And I found that fascinating. It's like, okay, like this is not a place that pro golfers typically come from. Like, it's covered in snow 6 months of the year. Like, how did this happen? And I was enthralled reading the story about, Joey
Yeah.
Garber and how he moved to Florida and he came back. That could be a great little short video. And like you said, if Joey Garber ever got in the mix, it's like, here's that, and part of me wonders if like that's partly on the tour. Like how can the tour
Yeah.
create these assets that then can be used when players get in the hunt? But, it's hard. Golf is I think that's like the tricky thing with golf. As you talk about the next, 20 years is like, how do you get people to care about number 70 in the
Yeah.
world? And these are
That's the thing.
extraordinarily high achievers, but like outside of these mega moments where Joel Damon takes his shirt off, it seems very hard for players of that ilk to break through.
That's true. And I like to compare this to like a team in the NBA where teams are generally categorized either in win now or rebuilding for the future, right?
Unless you're my
And I feel like
Bulls.
the PGA Tour, except the Bulls, the
Yeah,
Bulls are in the
we're
constant
more
state
of
of
a play-in
rebuilding.
team.
Same with the Hawks. It seems like it's Hawks Bulls every year. The
Heat
7-10.
and the Heat.
We're but it feels like the PGA Tour, we're always in a win now mode. We're riding our superstars and we're asking a lot of them. I mean, that's it's part of the nature of our business, but it's also not really that fair. But the greatest example is when Tiger went down for his massive disappearance. back in 2009, and all of a sudden we're all like, what are we going to do? There's a void. Tiger's like the greatest athlete on the planet right now, and all of a sudden he's not here. Well, golf does a great job of backfilling its stars. Jordan Spieth comes on board, Justin Thomas, Ricky Fowler, guys like that are really popular, and they still are. I'm not saying anybody will ever fill the Tiger void because Tiger's his own thing, but the thing is, it takes time for that backfill to happen. And if we're riding the superstars, we're never going to have any like immediate backfill with guys like the Joey Garber story. That's a great example. These vignettes, I think, can educate the fans. And I'm not really sure that I know the focus groups all say, show more shots. But all my friends that I talk to that watch golf say, I don't know who anybody is. And my response is always, I don't care if you know who they are. Their shots are amazing. And if you want to watch shots, you want to watch amazing shots. It shouldn't matter who hit the shot. But the people that watch golf will tell you that I don't know who the names are. And if there's big names on the leaderboard, they'll watch. If there's not, they probably won't watch. And the March Madness proves it out too. Everybody wants the underdogs to win. It's great. The 5 loses to the 12 and everybody's brackets get torn up. Well, at the Final Four, when you have a bunch of middle seed teams, the ratings are in the toilet because no one wants to watch. They want to watch the chalk.
Everybody wants the underdog story until the Final Four.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
It's I think that's a good. I think the thing that maybe golf needs to do is like where the telecast needs to be shook up is on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's the moments in time for the storytelling. And then it's, the last 2 hours of the telecast, it's lock in and watch what happens in the tournament. It's the storytelling aspect is the thing I think that's missed by the show more shots. And I think there is like, people get obsessed with like, what are the fans saying, And I agree that the fans are a big constituent that you want to listen to. You don't want to not listen to them, but there is like a certain degree of like the experts in the arena are the media executives that should be determining some of the things. Like some people don't know what they want until they see it or experience it. And I think that's like another aspect of this that gets, kind of changed. I think you're a unique, when you talk about golf and people becoming fans of people, you are kind of like a person that I point to, like you, a lot of your peers, Jim Furyk, Steve Stricker. One of the aspects of golf that is super important that I wonder about over the next 20 years is, your era of players, there were a lot of 20, 30-year careers. Your career spanned, you won basically in 3 decades, which is insane. But in that time, you think about like how golf fans get to know you over the years. And you go from in the early 2000s being a young player to then, in the mid 2000s, you're this established top 10 player in the world. And then your tail of your career continues into the 2020s where you're a household name. And that's kind of, I think, like I always think about like how golf really works well is like when you have this like crew of household names. Do you think part of this like building fandom is more important because do you see the world of golf changing in terms of like your types of careers are maybe less likely in the future?
I do think it's less likely in the future because as it sounds like the tour is shrinking, that's just going to be less players starting. We've already seen this. And with less players starting, there's the door. We reach capacity quicker. And so there's going to be more people leaving. So just math doesn't work for longer careers anymore. And when you add the typical golfer, decline around like early 40s, you can play a long time and still be very effective, but it's not really the distance anymore. It's not the the physical tools anymore. It's more like the physiology and the chemicals the brain produces when you're 50 as opposed to when you're 25. It just
What do you
doesn't
mean
let
by
you.
that?
Well, your brain shifts from a sort of like, I just want to like bust through every wall and get everything I can get when you're in their 20s to when you're in the 50s, it's kind of like, let's just gather these acorns and put them in the little basket and we'll just walk away quietly and conserve. That's the way that human beings' brains develop. And that 50-year-old conservative mentality, and I'm not talking politically conservative, I mean
Yeah.
conservational, that doesn't equate to like rip your heart out, go for broke golf. And when you're playing against guys that have that kind of chemical physiology, well, that's the reason that we decline. It's not because we can't hit it far. Most of the guys that are turning 50 now hit it just as far as they did when they were, 36. So technology and what we know about biomechanics and all that has made that possible. But you can't turn off that chemical faucet in your brain. It changes because that's the way that human beings were created. And that's a fact. So long answer. Anyway, yes, I do feel like because of that natural decline in the 40s, that more players are going to leave earlier than they have over the course of history because the pool is just smaller. There's not as much room in there.
That mental shift, there's a great Padraig Harrington quote from a couple years ago at the Open. It was like, I think it was along the lines of like, experience isn't all it's cracked up to be. With experience, you lose innocence, and that seems to be what you're kind of hitting on. Is like almost like that naive mindset where you rip through and you're not thinking of anything. Versus you get older, you start to think about more stuff. Do you think that kind of struggle with your brain manifests itself in particular areas of the game more than others?
Um, Probably in you look at the yardage book, you plan your shot. When we're all like into the data stuff, so you kind of know it's not that hard to figure out what the best play is, but somewhere in the downswing is where I think that switch happens, where you decide like I don't really want to be right on this hole, and that's when you bail left. And that's I think where it affects you is that when the rubber meets the road, that's that's what happens. You bail on a shot where you back in your 20s you'd be going for everything and like there are no consequences. And now over time, Padraig is right. We experience teaches us the consequences just like it teaches us the successes. And you hang on to both. In fact, the brain hangs on to them more the negative stuff than it does the positive stuff because it doesn't see the positive stuff as a threat. It's the subconscious busy picking up threats that and when it sees something in its environment that matches like a threat, like a three putt on a hole that really mattered, like the 72nd hole of a tournament, and it sees that possibility, it's like threat. We got like a red alert here, but it doesn't see like holding the trophy as a threat, so it just discards that memory. I mean, sure, it's a memory, but it's not like a physiological response type of memory. That's what I think Padraig was telling you when, or telling that when he meant. That's what he meant when he used that quote about the innocence. Is that your battle scars? It's just another way to describe it. And yeah, you flinch at the bottom of that swing to avoid trouble. When you're 25, you just there is no trouble. You just take dead aim.
You're just about 30 years from your first PGA Tour win. I guess you're 30 years from your first Nike Tour wins now. Um, what would you, if you could go back to your younger self, what would be the piece of advice you would tell, 23-year-old Stewart Cink? What would you tell them about golf or life now?
Well, two things. First, the biggest thing I would say is get to work on making sure this doesn't become your identity right now. Because I started doing that about 10 years later. And that 10 years I feel like got wasted a little bit. And the reason is because I just, this is number two thing I would say is that don't sweat it. Just I spent a lot of time, I feel like looking back on, especially my first 10 years on the PGA Tour, really sweating it and living and dying by the results of every day and every shot. And I probably cost myself years of my life. It just was not a good way to live. There's only so much you can control in golf. And where that golf ball goes and where it lands and what that score says on your card, those things are not in the pile of stuff you can control. And man, it's really hard to detach yourself from that. But those are the things I would tell myself as a 23-year-old. What you called it 30 years ago. is to not sweat it and unweave your identity from what that scorecard and what that money list and all those victories and all that stuff. Unweave it from who you are.
Yeah, it's a fascinating part of golf. I kicked around the idea of trying to play in my early 20s, and I went down to Florida and I worked, but I would play tournaments as an amateur. And what I found during that period of time was that golf got way harder for me, like way harder. And the second I decided this wasn't for me. I'm not cut out for this. I don't think I'm A, good enough, but B, like I don't know if I want to do this for 10 years to like have maybe a shot. And I went back home and I feel like when I started to work, then like weekend golf, I started shooting like really great scores again. And it was like, oh, like this is because it's such a smaller part of my life where I'm not wrapped up in like, oh, I hooked one on the range today and I'm worried about like, is this going to happen? Like it's so hard. I can't imagine trying to compartmentalize golf when you're on the road by yourself in a hotel and this is what you're doing.
Yeah, I know, and it's almost unfair to try to put golf in that kind of a little corner in your life because the fact is it matters to somebody who's had a long career playing, and it does matter. But in a performance kind of sense, you're better off the less it matters. And your example is perfect because as soon as it didn't matter to you as much anymore, you became a lot better at golf. And the stories I hear from players who are now former players who go to work and get their amateur status back and they kill it out there in the state am. Most of them don't even play because it's not fair. It's the same exact thing. I've never played better golf. I've never played better. And it's true. They don't play, they don't practice. They play every 2 weeks and they average about 67. And they never did that when they played in the pros. Now, of course, the golf course is a little bit different and the setups, a little kinder, but still you have to hit the shots and it's just it's a level of, you got to ratchet down the importance of the results in your life and the way it affects who you are and the way it affects the rest of your life. And that's a really tricky thing to do when all you want on that 8-footer is to make that putt. All you want is to make it. It's the most important thing in the world at that moment. And you have to dial it back and say, you know what? I'm going to put 10,000 of these. My goal is to make 1% more than I should, not make this very one.
What were the best ways that you found to, make your life more than just results oriented with
Oh
golf?
my gosh. I probably should write this stuff down because I've forgotten most of it. The biggest thing for me, like in actual performing, like playing, it was just first of all recognition and understanding. Like look around. Like let's be grateful and let's remember that my wife always says she gets on my nerves so bad when she says this, but she says you've already done probably as bad as you're ever going to do in this game and it's most embarrassing and the most epic failure. And you're probably already done the best you're ever going to do. So nothing you do from here on out is ever going to fall outside those boundaries. And you've survived both. So why are you worried? And it's so true. And it's actually just helps quite a bit, to realize that like, all right, yeah, I had a 3-shot lead 3 holes ago and now I'm down by 1 because I just hit a couple balls in the desert. The heart rate's going. I feel like the biggest loser on the planet. Everybody's going to be asking me questions. And I remember what she said. You're probably never going to do worse than you already did. And you're probably never going to do better than you've already done. And so keeping that perspective is an important thing. So recognition, but then also like as an operational kind of thing, I just really try to just bury myself in the process. The most boring old adage that everybody says in every interview in every sport, stick to the process. But it's so true. Try to control the things you can control. I can control my pre-shot routine, and I hate the word routine. It's so not the right word for what it is. The operational process that happens before impact should not be called a routine because it is anything but routine. It is a constructed and executed, it's like a it's a real process that I try to hit before impact. And after impact, I'm like, oh, now I'm a spectator. So I hate the word routine. I've always hated that. But that's the way I use my routine, is to keep me focused on something before the shot, so I don't have to be focused on where the ball's going to go and what that scorecard's going to look like.
Yeah, that I'm forgetful. I lose rangefinders a lot. It's just like a silly thing, but like I notice I play so much better when I go through the process of walking off yardages off of sprinkler heads and like with a pin sheet than I do with a rangefinder. And it's what you're saying. The process isn't just like your pre-shot routine. It's everything you do and how you interact when you get up to the ball, like you're 20 yards away, you're thinking about the yardage. That's all like the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you're hitting on is if you're deep in the process, you actually have less time to have those intrusive or look ahead thoughts that come in and wreck golf,
Yeah. And it's not just that you have less time, although that is important. And I would say that you using a yardage book and a pin sheet takes probably like 8 or 10 seconds longer. And that gives you time for your brain to sort of switch into that mode of being an athlete. Whereas if you're using a rangefinder, like we all do, and heck, we use them on the PGA Tour Champions in tournament play. But how easy is it just to be talking and laughing and get to your ball and go zap, and then that's a 7-iron and hit your shot? You don't even plan anything.
No,
It's not all that healthy. But no, I think it's the time that you spend doing the yardage book. And then the other thing you mentioned, it's not just the time where you don't have time to, for those thoughts to creep in, those negative thoughts. I think we also are multitasking doesn't exist. We can't think about more than one thing at a time consciously. So if you're going back to that process I was talking about, if I'm fully engaged with the process all the way until impact, my brain can't switch over and think about the result. It just can't. It doesn't have the ability to. So I'm locked in on something else in order to keep the mind occupied so that it can't wander to the current most important thing in my life, which is where that daggum golf ball goes.
Just while we're on the subject of your like long spanning career, what would you say in your time as a pro golfer has been the biggest change to the pro golf landscape?
There's just been so many big changes it's hard to say, but I'll just name a couple that I think are the largest ones. I don't think it's the driver. I think it's the ball. The distance is, I think it's a ball thing, not a driver thing. I mean, remember back in before 2000, we all had a choice. We could use a Pinnacle and hit it really far and have no control on the approach shots, or we could use a Bellata golf ball that was wound that didn't go as far. We had tons of control. Pick your poison, right? Pro V1 comes out, and I know the Bridgestone ball, and there's a few others at the same time, but really the Pro V1 was the one that just knocked over the industry. It comes out, and now no one has to make a choice anymore. Now we have a Pinnacle off the tee and a Bellata ball everywhere else, except it's durable. So to me, the golf ball was the biggest change in distance. And the driver is more forgiving, but we would hit the old drivers pretty far with this ball too. So the golf ball was probably the number one most consequential piece of equipment. And then after that, I'm going to have to say the TrackMan probably. Because the TrackMan has just taught us so much about how to optimize what's available with the golf ball and the technology. Hitting up on it 4 or 5 degrees with your driver, launching it higher and faster with less spin, just maximizes your carry. And back then, before the launch monitors were existing, the only way you knew that is by hitting drivers side by side on a course and then driving or walking out to the landing area and looking at the balls. And you didn't really know like which one landed and hit a soft spot and stopped, and which one landed way back there and rolled. And you're like, oh, well, that driver number 2 is a lot longer. Look, that ball's out there, but it might have carried 15 yards shorter, but we didn't know. So the TrackMan has given us like a real definitive picture of what's going on with the ball all the way downrange from impact to landing. And it's taught us a lot about what the wind does to the ball, what altitude does to the ball, what our club dynamics are doing. It's just, it's an enormous educational tool that I think has helped so much. And it's, to me, that's really what has, back in my earlier years, the PGA Tour was really top heavy. And then as you got down towards the bottom of the field, the level of skill really trailed off. Nowadays, the fields are top heavy and bottom heavy because there's so many players that are so close together that the players at the bottom are capable of winning. And I think it's because of the TrackMan and how everybody's just so optimized.
Yeah, the best way I've heard it phrased that is Jeff Ogilvy told me. He said the tour before TrackMan, you'd walk down the range and everybody would be like, "I think I found it," and like that was the idea of like, I think I got it. And then after TrackMan, everybody knew the answer. And there was no. Do you have any like funny stories or memories of like where you thought you had it and it just was gone? The
Oh
next
my
week.
gosh. Well, I remember hearing a funny anecdote about another player who, this is really having anything to do with launch monitor, but it's a funny story anyway, so I'm gonna tell it. And I don't think Gary Hallberg would mind if he if I told you. But this got passed down to me, so there's a chance that it wasn't even Gary Hallberg, but the person that told me said this is what Gary Hallberg did. So he's on the putting green before a tournament. I think it was Canadian Open, and on the practice green with his caddy, he's just holding everything. I mean, he's like, "Look at this! Look at this little change I made, holding everything." And they get to the first green, and he hits it in there about 8 feet, and he calls his caddy over, and his caddy thinks he's going to come over and read the putt. And Gary Hallberg says, "Yeah, remember that I was doing on the putting green?" He goes, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "What was it?" So that's like when you think you found it. I mean, how many times have you been on the range and you're like, you leave the range like you're the best golfer in the world, and the next day you're like, "What was I doing? I can't remember." But yeah,
It's
I don't remember any specific stories like that. I remember pre-launch monitor when the only thing you had going was your eyes, and we on the PGA Tour had reps out there that were pretty good. They were excellent at like watching a driver and saying like, "Nope, too much spin, not enough spin," and it was just an eyeball thing. But I certainly remember thinking I had it on the drive with the driver, especially on the range, and then going to the golf course and being like, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. I'm going back to the old original." So, but yeah, that's a different story today.
Yeah, you just like think about like beyond just like your golf swing, the club optimization of the TrackMan. I'm curious when you describe pre Pro V1. Interestingly, like you had this choice. You had the Bellatas, you had the Tour Professionals, you had the Pinnacles if you wanted to go no spin. How do you think that revealed itself with like players? Was there more ability to play different ways because of the different shortcomings of different balls and technology?
Probably so. I would probably point to the club side of the equipment more because it didn't have the forgiveness that we have now. So nowadays, I think a kid in college, if they're on a really tight hole and they need to hit the fairway, I think the go-to club's the driver. And 25 years ago, that was 2 iron. You were like, "I'm just getting this in play." Now the driver, I think, is the club that most kids feel like they can hit the straightest. That's really a different fundamental shift in golf. But before, I think to get the most out of the ball that spun a lot and the club, the driver, that maybe even the irons that were just a little bit less on the technology, less on the forgiveness, you had to probably do something with the ball a little bit more. Like, I'm going to squeeze a cut, or I'm going to kind of hit down on this and hit it low, and it's going to come out with some more spin. Or there was just less uniformity to golf than there is now. And the answer, or the goal in the game, is still to shoot the lowest score and to beat all the other players. So it doesn't matter how you do it, but there's way less uniformity now than there used to be. I'm not saying that's really a bad thing. I don't think. I think it takes a lot of skill to be very uniform in golf, and that's one of the things I strive toward, is to be very uniform. But I wouldn't have said that in 1995. I would have said, like, if I need to hit a fairway, I'm teeing this sucker down, and I'm going to hit a low cut that's probably going to carry 235. And if it rolls 25 yards, that'd make me happy.
Um, I want to talk a little bit about the '09 Open. Obviously, huge moment in your career winning a major championship. Outside of like the obvious winning moment, the putt on 18, is there a shot or an exchange or like a underlying like small moment that you find yourself replaying in your head all these years later?
The things I remember most, I mean, I can tell you like pretty much every moment for 4 straight days there, but the things I remember most about that week are that Tom Watson was involved and it kept me very distracted, which was a great thing. Kept me kind of not focused on my own stuff because I get nervous. I'm a nervous player, and having Tom involved just kept me focused on like, wow, look, let's. I was a sports fan too, so I would hit a shot and then look at the leaderboard and think like, gosh, Tom, look at this. This is amazing. This is such an inspiration. So that was a big deal for me. And around maybe 12 or 13 on Sunday, I was in the hunt all week, but on 12 or 13 Sunday, I kind of switched out of that mode and got in. I made about a 12 footer on early in the back nine to kind of get either tied or right near maybe one back. And I got out of the Tom Watson mode and I got into like my own mode. And but I remember that distraction and that just like I just feel like it was a huge help for me to be like focused on something else besides what I'm going to do. And then the 18th hole, the way it played out there, Frank Williams was my caddy, and we had just such a great game plan for that hole. We were landing the ball because it was downwind and it was a brick out there. We were
Yeah.
landing the ball in a gap. Um, we said 5 to 15 yards short of the green was our landing spot. It was a nice flat area, like so many links courses have, and every day we just did the same thing. Just flew it right in that little spot and just like dropping a grenade and let's see what happens, right? The ball always just kind of like trundled up onto the green and rolled somewhere near the middle of the green. I mean, it's just classic links play. And on Sunday's round, the pin happened to be kind of close to where the ball kept trundling. And so I ended up making birdie there. And then in the playoff, did the same thing. But that was my game plan. And I love that aspect of golf, like having a game plan, executing it, and having the game plan work out. It takes three things, to have a good shot. And links golf is one of the things I love most about it is it gives you that opportunity to game plan, and you never really know how it's going to work out because there's so much vagary. But in that case, there the conditions set up pretty similar the last 3 days, like just the same direction of wind and a similar amount of wind, a lot of it, and it enabled us to just to work that game plan out every day exactly the same way. And it was really just a cool for somebody who loves links golf to see that play out into a major win was like something dreams are made of.
What is it about links golf that like lends itself more to game planning than normal tour golf?
Well, I think in normal tour golf, the ball's not rolling as far, and we're really good at hitting it in the air, the right distance and the height and all that stuff. So your game planning is just a little less complex. There's just a little less options because you kind of know, like, well, this hole is going to be, I want to hit it somewhere between 260 and 290. And then my second shot's probably going to be, somewhere between a 7 iron and 9 iron. And then the hole location is determined like your strategy on the hole. Over there, the firmness of the ground and the wind dictate more than I think the hole locations do. And so you got to look at a lot more area of where you might land a ball based on different kind of conditions. And that's why you look at a course map or you play a links course and you see bunkers just kind of all over the place in the most random areas. Like, why would that even be there? Of course, the old adage, you hear the guy who says like, why is that bunker there? And the next day you couldn't even reach it because the wind direction and the course changes so much every day. But you've got just a lot bigger, area with which to play, and you need to kind of be ready for it all. And there's a lot of game planning that just happens kind of on the fly over there too, because it's impossible to foresee every possible scenario. And I just think that's why I like about it because it's just so much more possibilities.
Yeah, and I think what you hit on, I think about like the shots that I take the most satisfaction on in golf are like when you hit, the chip that has like maybe a little check and trundles then over a ridge like and rolls out perfectly, or the approach shot that you have to land 5 yards short of a green and it runs in. There's some satisfaction with golf when the ball hits the ground and you judge that correctly. I think what you said, like, you know, hitting a golf ball in the air roughly the right yardage is like, for a tour pro especially, like a pretty, like, it's just a skill you have to have a moniker
Yeah.
of success to get there. But then all the other things and the understanding of what the ball's going to do once it hits the ground, that's like the PhD of golf.
Yes.
um with you getting to play now opens, I mean, it's got to be the most amazing thing. You get to go to Scotland for a couple weeks every year, or the, or Northern Ireland, or wherever the Open is. You got to go for a couple of weeks for foreseeable part of your life. In terms of, you played basically every single Open venue that there is. If you were in charge of making the Roto, what courses would be on it?
It would be St. Andrews, and that's all. I have this love affair with St. Andrews. I love the old course so much. I just can't get enough old course. And I just think it's so much fun to play, and it's just like it's a wonder being there and knowing how old it is. Actually, not knowing how old it is, and then the way the course can be set up for public play and for a major. And yeah, if the wind's not blowing that hard, the players tear it apart, of course. But I don't care. The shots that you hit there and the way that course presents itself to you are just it's just remarkable how great it is and how cool some of those shots are. So I would probably just have a one course rotation there. It would be like the Players Championship of the major rota, just one
The good
course.
news, you're only 1 year away from the next Open at the Old Course.
That's true. That's true.
It, do you have
Yeah,
a particular favorite hole or feature of the Old Course that every time you see it, you're just like, wow?
I kind of like the huge mound in front of four.
That's one
I
I
mean,
always think of too.
it looks like a Hershey's Kiss that someone put in like a growth ray or something, and it grew up about 500 times, and it's just sitting there for no reason except to screw with your brain. Because it's exactly where you want to land the ball for almost every location. I mean, it's so obvious that a couple of dudes went out there with a shovel and just built it, and it's been there forever, and no one says a word about it. But it's exactly where you want to land your ball. And you got to put some kind of curve on it and land it right or left of that thing. And it's always in your mind, and it's right there in the front of the yardage book. It's probably the first time anyone's ever singled that feature out as their most notable feature on the on the golf course.
Um, I think one of my favorite stories in recent years was Reagan. Your son got on the bag at the end of your PGA Tour career, and you guys banged out a couple wins. Like, kind of felt, as a close observer, felt kind of out of nowhere. All of a sudden, Stu Cink is just on a rampage, and I'm just curious. You've had, professional caddies your whole life. And I think Reagan, became a professional caddy in the year plus that he was on your bag. But what was the difference in having your kid caddy for you for a long time, and like the dynamic of how you talk to each other and what he saw in your game versus a pro jock, like just a caddy that's like a professional that might not have that close personal connection?
I think the one word that would sum most of it up would be conflict, and in parentheses, a lack thereof. With Reagan, the any little conflict I had with caddies in the past, like strategic plan, or how close to aim towards a flag if there's water, stuff like that. The kind of decisions you have to be like comfortably at home with when you choose your strategy in pro golf. Those conflicts disappeared with Reagan because he's grown up playing golf with me. We've played 1,000 rounds. Every time we play golf with each other, we caddy for each other. Basically, we're like talking through every shot, and he's a good golfer, so he understands golf. Like, his golf IQ's off the charts high, way higher than his zero handicap or whatever it is. So the conflict was just gone. I knew he believed in me. We had a really good system we were using to, to kind of determine like how much risk to take on. It was very calculated and data driven. He believed in that. Um, and I mean, also the motivation, like he wasn't motivated to pay his mortgage or anything like that. He just wanted to go out there and have fun. And he was, he had just accepted a job with Delta Airlines, but COVID apparently was pretty big with the airlines, big thing. So his
There's
job
less people
started,
flying.
yeah, his job starting date kept getting pushed back, and he was at home. I probably told you this story because you walked around with us at St. Andrews that one day.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
the first tournament back, I was coming back off an injury. I'd had a little time off. COVID gave me a little time off, and we were about to go to Napa, and Napa is a pretty expensive place for the caddies. And my caddy was like, "Are you going to get in? Do you think I should make a flight?" And I mean, a lot of this is kind of non-refundable, kind of like, commitment for the caddy. And Reagan was overhearing some of this conversation. He's like, "Hey, I'm not doing anything right now. If it would help, I'll caddy." That's how it started. And we go out there and win. And so it was supposed to be 1 week just to kind of give my caddy Kip a kind of reprieve from having to commit and maybe not even get in the field. But I got in and we won the tournament, and that's how it all started. So bad news for Kip, great news for the Cink household, and it turned into 2 years with just like it was the most special time in my career for sure. Having him caddy was just so fun.
I could only imagine. I think it's something I'm in the stage of having a young kid and watching him, but like, do you just think about like the precious amount of time, you see it kind of dwindling away. Like I look at like my kid, she's almost 6, and it's like, well, how many more years? And like it had to feel like a bonus.
Yeah, and a lot of things had to come together for us. So we had our kids really young. So as a 46-year-old, I had two children who were well into the age where they could caddy full time. Reagan's the younger one, so we had our kids young, and then my career lasted a long time. So not many people span that time where they have kids old enough where they can still, caddy. I mean, there's plenty of guest appearances by teenagers out there that caddy for their dad a couple of tournaments, and Reagan and Connor both did that too. But as far as why don't you come on and caddy for a little while, and let's see how it goes. And we went first, 12th, fourth in our first three tournaments, and it was kind of like, all right, this is going to be something that lasts a little while.
I mean, it goes though to a lot of things you said about like your career. Like you're someone who gets nervous, right? Having your son, like has to take your mind away a little bit. Like you talked about the Tom Watson distraction. Like having your kid,
Yeah,
like there's so much stuff to talk about, even if it's just your kid's life. Like just listening to him talk about
yeah,
what's going on in his life. It
yeah.
had to be amazing. Changing gears here, you played in 5 Ryder Cups, 9 total team competitions. You've been an assistant captain for both the President's Cup and the Ryder Cup. In your career, how would you say that the culture of the Ryder Cup has changed or evolved?
The culture of the Ryder Cup, I think the players just have a lot more power than they used to have. Um, it's a lot bigger business out there playing golf as a professional on the PGA Tour than it used to be. So it's recovery. Well, we know more about all this stuff. It takes more time. I'm not trying to say anything bad about the players because I do all this stuff too, but um, there's just way less hang, way more business like approach. There's pre and post round uh, physio stuff, and the days just take a lot longer than they used to. That's just the way it is on the PGA Tour, and so it makes the team aspect, it lessens the team aspect, especially with regard to like the wives and the significant others and caddies. It used to be all one big team affair, and now it's a lot more like individual things. And I'm not saying that's some reason that the U.S. team has not been succeeding, because the European team does the same stuff. That's just the way it is. But that's the like the personality of the team room is way different than it used to be. The players control a lot more. There's just a lot more power that has shifted from the captain and the PGA of America to the players, and that's what it seems like to me after being an assistant for one of each team the last couple of years. That the players are just way more in power.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? You like want it to be, like the old adage of like treat it like any other week, right? But then you have the other thing, like the other elephant in the room is like, what's Europe doing that the U.S. isn't doing? Like, or is it just they're playing better? Like, in your estimation, being intimately involved, what would you say to the frustrated U.S. Ryder Cup fan?
Well, one thing I haven't ever been is intimately involved with the European team, so I can't say what it is they're doing. I mean, we have kind of an idea of what they do, but they, I believe, have a very deep, um, long-standing plan that's been in place for a long time, and they don't waver from their plan. It doesn't always lead to winning, but I think their players are groomed from an early age to be Ryder Cuppers, and they have past captains and players and future captains that are their assistants. They aren't. Um, they're not very. They don't waver on their system, their plan, and you can kind of see from the outside their pairings too, who they put together. Now they have, in a way, a little bit of a benefit when you have, like, let's say, two Scandinavian players who can play together, and you have two Spanish players who can play together. Well, we have like two guys from California and two guys from New York. Well, that's not really quite the same like nationality. We don't see people waving the California flag out there. But we do see Spanish and Swedish and English flags. So they have a little bit of an edge, I think, in that national sort of like bond with within countries that they can just make some natural pairings with. Um, I don't think that explains anything on the overall record, but that's part of their system, I believe. And we don't really have necessarily that. We have more like social, silos where players sort of reside. They have their dinners, they stay together. But the European team, you can see in their choices of their captains and assistants that they have like a strong plan. They have leadership that's not captains. They have a good leadership that's sort of overseeing the whole thing. And, it's leading to a good bit of success and the players buy into it.
If you were to be a captain, how would you approach maybe in your own unique way? What would be a unique thing that you would bring to the table?
Man, if we're first of all, I think if we're playing overseas, I think we got to go over earlier. We got to get there. We can't just show up on Monday and expect to be ready to go by the time the opening ceremonies are over. It's just the body doesn't work like that. Not when things are this close together. You got the top. Well, it's not fair to say the top 24 players in the world, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's like basically like 24 of the top 35 players
Yeah, that's
every
about
year.
right. So you got players that are this good and this close together going at it in a team. You got to just like the margins have to be won. We have to win the margins, and we can't let jet lag be part of it. And I think that's happening when we go over there. Um, would definitely want my players to be here a lot earlier, and probably not making the families happy, but it's just part of the deal. If you want to compete and win, be at your best.
Well,
That would be the
I
first
hear
thing.
Adair Manor is a beautiful hotel. So,
Adair Manor is beautiful. I'm sure it is, and Ireland's lovely. So, like the European guys came over this year early and just played a lot of golf in Long Island. I mean, that was fun, and I'm sure they probably had the conversation with their wives. They were kind of like, "Yeah, yeah, Luke wants us to come over quite a bit earlier this year." And it probably didn't go well, but as far as I know, I think they all did it. The ones that were able to. I think Sepp had some issues at home. He might not have been able to do it, but the we just have to be ready to play. And I was part of that team in Italy as an assistant for Zach, and Zach did a great job. And Zach's one of my best friends. I hate the fact that he's getting so much negativity about the Ryder Cup. I mean, he did the best job he could have done. I mean, you could go back and say, yeah, in hindsight, you probably would have changed some things, but we didn't have the benefit of hindsight at the time, and we thought we were doing everything as well as we could. And
The
I
thing
think
about the
jet lag
Ryder
is a
Cup
factor, though.
captaincy is if you win, you're this hero. Like that, I've never heard of a losing Ryder Cup captain getting a good like being like, you know what, they did a great job, even if they lost by a half a point.
Yeah, it's because they all do a great job. They all. I mean, I had the polar opposites of the spectrum for personalities with my Ryder Cup captains. I had Zinger, I had Corey, I had Hal, I had Curtis, and Tom Lehman. And those guys are all like basically peppered across the spectrum. And guess what? They all did fabulous. All of them. We only won one time. And I don't know that it's because of the way that Zinger captained. The other guys did great. It was up to us to win or lose. We didn't win except for once. And so, yeah, I've always thought that the captain gets way too much credit for winning and way too much crap for losing. It's just it's a Willies and the Joes.
It's they're just jogging. Who's a player from your era, like at any point of your career, that you feel like didn't get the respect of like how good they were? Like you watch them and it was like, God, this guy's good, but like no national pub on how good he was.
David Toms. He'd be the one. He won like, I don't even know how many tournaments, 14 in the PGA. He was like consistently up there. He was good in every facet of the game. He was a nice dude. He's really popular. He won the PGA championship and never even been considered for an assistant position or a Ryder Cup captaincy. Never had his name mentioned one time.
Isn't he coaching too in Louisiana? Doesn't he have like a
He's got
whole,
an academy. I don't think he
yeah.
does any coaching, but he's got an academy. He's got coaches there. Yeah, he's good for the game. I shouldn't say. I believe Sam Burns might have come out of his academy.
I think
I'm
it was
not 100% sure.
Barbary and Burns, I feel like were both came out of there. It was a story at like either USAM or something years ago.
Yeah, so and he's one of my great friends too. So I know a lot about his academy down there, and he would never say it. He would never be the one to say like, my name never came up, but he's the one I would pick, and just a great guy, and he played so good for a long time, and he's also my partner for the American Family, the team event we have out on the Champions Tour. So I got to rah him up and get him some confidence.
Yeah,
for that.
up in Wisconsin, up in the
That's right.
in the great northern Midwest. What are your as someone who's been involved with the tour for so many years, what do you think about the direction of the tour and the idea? I think like a popular thought is scarcity would be good for the PGA Tour. What are your kind of thoughts about that potential direction change?
Well, I mentioned this before, how the bottom of the field is way more capable than they used to be. And there's not that big a spread from top to bottom anymore. And so the parity in golf is increasing, and the skill level overall has just like vastly increased. But yet we're talking about shrinking the tour. To me, those things are at odds with each other. And I hate that. I hate that. I wish we could be opening up the game to more players. I think it would be good for us. But business wise, I understand that it doesn't. There's just only so much room, and then eventually, more players in the field become more of a cost than they do a benefit, and it's a sad thing, but it's kind of true in the nature of the sport. So, the fact that we have this new company called PGA Tour Enterprises that is for profit, and we have a heavy investor, that's invested a lot of money in the PGA Tour expecting a return. It's not just a sponsorship now. This is a new kind of a relationship we have that is expecting return. And so we have a responsibility to that. And I'm not a business expert, but I trust our leaders. And I believe that Brian, our new CEO, probably has it right that in order for us to make a profit, we probably, or increase our profits, we need to probably go that direction. And he's got a lot of experience in the world of sports and dealing with media and TV, especially. So I hate to say it, but I think he's probably right. I wish it was not that way though, because I just believe that there's more players than ever before that deserve a shot.
I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think if you got to a state of like true relegation, where like, hey, if Jordan Spieth finishes 72, he's off. He's off, like, or whatever the number is. It's 100, maybe it's 100 and 110. It's, if they're out of that, they're out. But then if that bottom group is like 300 players and there's true relegation and promotion, I think you might get into a spot, and you don't know how this would play out until it plays out in practice. Like, you could put this on a board, but like, to me, like, it's fascinating. Like, what's going on with Patrick Reed right now in Europe is crazy, but there are a lot of capable players in Europe. There's so much talent on the Korn Ferry Tour. There's so much talent in the bottom part of the PGA Tour, and you think about like being a rookie on tour is really hard these days because it's like, hey, you got like 10 tournaments, the first 10 tournaments that you can play to start the year. If you don't play well, like, you might want to just start playing the Korn Ferry Tour again. You know, it is a such a difficult, thought. But like, I think about like the juice of a event that's basically the bottom half of the tour, top half of Korn Ferry, and some European Tour players. The juice of that event, if one of the big names falls out for a year, would be huge. And then it also adds like a whole story and redemption arc to that player's career, where it's almost like their second, they're coming back, and it like makes them more marketable. I think there is like a world where in practice it works out really well, where it's like, you have these like really rich stories that come from coming up, I don't know though. You could go the other way and not work.
Just to be devil's advocate, if you have a full relegation setup, you just risk losing some of your top names. And Jordan Spieth's a great example. You risk losing that, and that's something that our sponsors say, hang on, we want to have the top name. So there's this tug of war between name recognition and absolute quality of play and skill, right? We face the same thing on the PGA Tour champions. The sponsors in the tournament offices want the Hall of Fame guys, and so do we. Don't get me wrong. But there's a pretty strong core of us that are like, we want this to be the best players over 50 in the world. Every week that's possible, the best players. And the model doesn't work. So if you use that example as a way to apply to the PGA Tour going forward, and you have like a full relegation, we only want the best players every week, then you're going to end up with a lot of players going back and playing in the next tour. We probably need a third tier is what we need. We probably need these, whatever they're going to be called in the future, these top 50 signature event, no cut type things. And then we need the rest of the PGA Tour and maybe some new tournaments. And then we need the Korn Ferry Tour, maybe a few less. And have this tier of up and down and all that stuff like you were talking about. I love the idea. I'm just not sure that our sponsors would stand for it.
Speaking of the Champions Tour, I expected that you were going to go up there and just, with the late career on the PGA Tour wins. Is the Champions Tour harder than the normal golf fan thinks, like, to win on the Champions Tour?
Yeah, it's harder to win because the players that are playing out there, they may have lost some of their absolute skill, like distance, and they haven't forgotten how to win tournaments and how to hang in there and grind it out. And it's harder than people think to win. And I learned that myself. I thought I was going to waltz out there and knock them dead. And it took me, it took me a year and a half before I got a first win. So, and I lost some tournaments in dramatic fashion along the way too. So there's a comfort level of moving to a new chapter and seeing new courses. And, there are new faces that I've known for years that I haven't played against in a long time. And so the level of play out there is really good. It's really good, and it's hard to win. You got to play really good golf to win. I have won in different fashions, and I've been really proud of every single one the way I've done it because they've all been different.
When you went up there, obviously, like, anybody that follows golf, it was like Stu Cink's going up there. He's going to clean up. Was there a guy that you played with that you're like, whoa, I was unfamiliar with this, what I'm seeing here, but this guy's really good.
I mean, no, because I've seen these guys for years and I know what they can do. And nothing surprises me out there. I knew going into it that it was going to be like a dog fight, but I just thought that my dog was going to fight a little bit better. And I played pretty well. I finished high a lot, but I just didn't get the job done at the end. I let a few leads go. I hit the ball in some, I made some doubles and triples here and there and just kind of threw away some tournaments. I got a little sloppy, but I think that was mostly happening when I was still trying. I had one foot on the PGA Tour and one foot on PGA Tour Champions, and I was going back and forth. And I was really doing kind of a crappy job on both. And so when I committed to play the PGA Tour Champions, and I realized I had this window of, you can really reap some pretty good rewards out there in this certain window if you keep yourself in decent shape. And I was letting this window slide by, and I started feeling like, I kind of wish I was playing Champions Tour because it's really fun getting in contention, and I'm in contention a lot. So when I committed to just play out there full time and leave the PGA Tour behind, I won the first one, and I think that change in mindset was like huge for me because it was like, this is my tour now, and I got to win that first week, and it's been pretty consistent since then.
Yeah, you just had your fifth win. Oh, season opener. You can't win them all unless you win the first one, right?
That's right.
Stewart, we'll have to have you back on. This was so fun. I got through like a tenth of the things I wanted to get through, but
anytime. I love talking to you guys.
This was awesome. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Again, big thanks to Stewart for the time. I really enjoyed that chat. A lot of fun topics there. We will be back next week. Big thanks to PJ Clark for editing and producing this podcast. I will be, I'm on vacation this week, but I will be back next week. We'll probably do some sort of catch up on the last 2 weeks of pro golf. But thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.